AdamShumpisxXx. How you going, mate? I just listened to your podcast, 1 hour and 11 minutes, 34 seconds. Very nice, mate. I never did know how to pronounce your lady co-host's name, so I'm not going to try it, but she was pretty cool too. I don't know whether it was so much you using the word fuck that got you kicked off Podbean. Probably the anti-natalism and the pro-suicide stuff and the comments about the only good cop is a dead cop. I can imagine that one going over particularly poorly in the excited states of Norte Amerikano. Yeah, I can see why you'd be pissed off at that Anti-Natalism, or however you say his name. I've been just absolutely amazed at the magnitude of his output. It's like, is he on YouTube for any reason other than to hammer the anti-natalists? I mean, I got sort of drawn into the anti-natalist conversation and I didn't mind getting involved in it for a while, but it was really, really high stress having flame wars, so maybe that's why he's not trying to answer anybody's criticisms. He's just pushing his point of view. He's got his wheelbarrow and he's going to push it. He knows that, say, Gary's got his wheelbarrow and Gary's going to push it. And Anti-Natalism seems to have figured out that by not answering any of Gary's responses, it'll drive Gary bloody wild. So you say, I don't know, I haven't looked at Gary lately and I haven't looked at more than 10 or 15 minutes of one of Anti-Natalism's anti-natalist diatribes, because I can see where he's going. He's going to use whatever debating and rhetorical skills he's got to demolish anti-natalism as an idea, and you know, that's his right, just as it's anti-natalists' rights to try and push it as a philosophy. Thanks for the shout out at about 16 minutes in. I appreciate that. Well, anyway, here's the mad old bastard in Australia, you know, getting back to you. So, from South Dundee Heights, drinking Dundee brand American booze that's cheaper in Australia than Australian booze because of something to do with the exchange rate, and your economy's more fucked than ours is at the moment. Okay, now, on the topic of having an armed citizenry to resist a government when they do bad shit, don't forget, mate, in 1933, when Hitler passed the Enabling Act, he'd only been in power for weeks or months. It was done because a French Jew was connected with the burning of the Reichstag, but that was probably a Nazi party set-up job. But the German culture has condoned all kinds of weapons for hunting purposes, and until after the Enabling Act went through and the race laws from Nuremberg were enacted and put in, there was no reason for Jews not to have firearms, and I would say that there would have been the same proportion of firearm ownership among Jews in Germany in 1932-33 as there was among every other kind of German, which is to say they would have had hunting rifles and shotguns, and quite possibly pistols too. The thing is, people who habitually use firearms for hunting don't tend to regard them as tools for solving interpersonal disputes with other humans because they know what the things do. So the Jews who were rounded up in 1933, they never thought to stage a one-man war against the authorities, right? They were too busy standing in neat straight rows and saluting the uniform because that's the Germanic culture. Now, regarding this business of shooting a dog in the spine and then tasering it, if you're going to use a firearm on a dog, the only humane thing to shoot is the dog's head and try and put it, you know, from being a threat to being unable to threaten and unable to feel pain in one blow. That's what you do. I once tied up two dogs and shot them because, you know, their owner kept letting them loose to feed on my poultry and the neighbour's poultry, and they'd eaten 36 pieces of poultry, and I'd told him, if you let your dogs on my land ever again unless it's got a collar and a leash and you on the end of the leash, I'm going to catch it and take it away and shoot it, because, you know, you're an irresponsible owner and I'm not permitted to shoot you, but I am permitted to shoot the dog. Shooting a dog is one of the most horrific things I've ever done. I won't go into it, but it's bad, you know, like shooting a dog is a fucking horrible thing, you know. And a person should shoot their own dog. It's worse when you farm it out to somebody else. Now, we're getting back to the pre-thought-out gun fantasy of if this, then that, if that, then that's. There's a movie called The Longest Day. It was Hollywood's 1960s or 1970s attempt to capture the Normandy invasion, and they shot it in black and white so they could splice in all the newsreel footage from the day. And there's a scene in there where all the American paratroopers are given little toy crickets, and they're told that if they hear somebody on the other side of a hedgerow, they're supposed to go click clack with their little cricket, and the answer from the other side is click clack click clack. Right? So one pair of click clacks is answered by two pair of click clacks, and that means that you've got a friend on the other side of the hedgerow. And later on in the movie, there's these people scrabbling around in the weeds wearing their army suits with their bang bang guns, and one of the American paratroopers goes click clack, and he hears click clack click clack, and he stands up and goes, "Hey buddy," and he gets shot in the face by the German soldier on the other side. And then the camera pans in to the German soldier working his bolt. Click clack, shell goes out. Click clack, shell goes in. If you postulate, as you did, that the potential thief has cased the joint and knows you've got a firearm, surely if the potential thief is deciding that they're going to go in there up against you with your firearm, they're going to take along a pineapple. And as soon as you go click clack trying to send Morse code messages with the bolt action, they're going to pull the pin, release the spoon, count to 3 and throw the pineapple, and they're going to blow you 57 new arseholes all over your chest and your abdomen. Right? If you draw a weapon on a person, you must be prepared to shoot. Without warning, get your first shot off. You know, a successful fighter pilot is somebody who sneaks up on strangers and shoots them in the back and fucks off before their mates can notice. If you don't grasp that, then you've got no business fantasising about using guns to settle interpersonal disputes. I can grasp it, but I'm just not prepared to do it, so I don't do the guns for the interpersonal disputes. Now, as hard as it is for you to grasp, if you want to live in a perfect world, then you have to start by doing it yourself. If everybody lives as if the world was perfect, then that's what we get. If everybody says, "Oh, I'd like to live in a perfect world, but it ain't perfect yet, so therefore I'm going to have 57 cannons and an electrified front fence and razor wire," then everybody does that and you never get into the perfect world. You know, it's like people who recite the Lord's Prayer and never do a fucking single thing to make it come into effect. In the God theory that I subscribe to, that's blasphemy. Don't know whether I told you this story. Once upon a time, I used to carry a gun in the car in case I found a kangaroo with a broken leg that needed to be put out of its misery, or perhaps a rabbit that I could shoot for the pot. And a bloke went off in a parking lot in a place called Strathfield, and he had an SKS rifle, and he fired 60 rounds and he hit 15 people and he killed 7 of them, including himself. And I decided at the time, well, the nutters are starting to pop off, you know. They're like grains of popcorn in a saucepan. You never know which one of them is going to go crazy next. So I started to carry a firearm to shoot people with. Instead of carrying a hunting rifle, I started to carry a people gun. And I got a Winchester 32-30, you know, with the 8-sided flat barrel, and it was a lovely old thing, but it was a pistol round dressed up and put into a rifle. And yeah, it was pretty good for stopping people at a distance of about, well, 15 yards maximum. And I knew that that was fine, because the average distance in the average gunfight in the excited states of North America, where 13,500 people die from handguns every year, the distance in the average gunfight is 8 feet. 8 feet. So I figured this 1898 Winchester was going to be just fine, you know, like I'd be in the car park at the supermarket, some fucking idiot starts going bananas with a gun, I just pull out the old lever action and plug the prick. That was my theory. Within a week of me carrying a gun to shoot at people instead of carrying a gun to put animals out of their misery, as I got to the front gate at Swallow Shit Hollow, I stopped the car, I put my foot on the ground, and a bullet bounced off a rock. And it was maybe 3 yards away. And 3 yards on the other side of the puff of dust, there was a kangaroo. And the kangaroo and I looked at each other and we said, well, I didn't do it. And the kangaroo ran away. And I looked across the river, and about 120, 130 yards away, at a distance where my firearm would have had the bullets coming vertically down out of the sky, there was a 4-wheel drive with both front doors open, and I was looking up 2 rifle muzzles. And they'd obviously been drawing a bead on the kangaroo. My car had come over the hill. The kangaroo had frozen, hoping I wouldn't see it, and they'd decided to take the shot at the kangaroo. And at a distance of 110 yards, they missed the roo by the same distance they missed me. So I looked at the weapon and at the 10 rounds I had in the glove box, and I didn't know what guns they had, but they had hunting rifles, and it was probably going to be better than my 100-year-old people gun. So I didn't shoot back at them. So that's most of the plan gone, you know. Somebody shoots at you, you shoot back and kill them. And then I got in the car and I drove over to Argufy with them. And when I got there, one of them was a bloke called Mang. And Mang had been in a group of people who the previous year or 2 years earlier, he'd been in a hunting party walking along the ridge when me and a bunch of other people had been down on the flat, and we'd found a goanna in a tree. And I'd been the bloke with the semi-automatic shooting at the goanna, and the other two people were 120 degrees around the tree and were, you know, making this goanna run around the tree. But my semi-automatic 22 rifle fire had been going over Mang's head when he was on the ridge. Probably 100 feet over his head, but over his head nonetheless. So when I got there to tell him how friggin' dangerous it was to shoot close to people, I had nothing to say because he'd said it all to me 2 years before. Karma. Cosmic scoreboard effect, right? That's when I learnt that there's no fucking point carrying a gun to shoot back at people, because as soon as you do that, somebody shoots at you. Right? It's that fast. Bang. Now, as you know, I took my grandfather's semi-automatic target rifle to boarding school with me, and I became captain of the rifle team. This is my grandfather's shooting box from when he was a target rifle shooter with a 303 Lee Enfield. Inside are the leather elbow pads which he used to soak up the recoil, and which I used back in the 1970s when my best target was 98 at 25 yards, but the best one that I got to hang on to, here's one with a score of 92. Using my grandfather's target rifle when I was captain of the rifle team. And yeah, I got a bunch of old targets. However, the thing with target shooting is that you wind up getting very, very good at shooting at black dots on pieces of paper. And the black dots don't ever shoot back, and they don't bleed. I remember back in the days when nearly every house in Australia had several guns, and back in those days, maybe 3/4 of the people who got shot were shot by accident. And people very rarely used guns to settle interpersonal disputes. I can remember a few as a kid, you know. Bloke shot his wife after telling her not to come back, you know. But most of the people who got shot when I was a kid, it was by accident. Getting through a fence, cleaning a gun, that sort of thing. And I think it's nicer to live in the sort of society where most of the shootings are accidental. At the moment, nearly all the shootings that happen in Australia are deliberate. You know, 3/4 of them. Somebody meant to shoot somebody else, or themselves. So, I find it interesting that when we live in a relativistic universe where everybody sees life lit by the lights of their own experiences and perceptions, that somebody who can't countenance conceiving a child because the child may grow up to be miserable and suffer in a world where there's a lot of misery and suffering, would so cavalierly pre-think all the various ways in which it becomes acceptable to use deadly force against people that you haven't met, for stuff that you haven't discussed with them, on the basis of a whole bunch of assumptions, which really boil down to, you know, having watched too many John Wayne movies. A man's got to do what a man's got to do. It's just crap. You have no right to do evil just because you fear suffering evil. You know, Socrates said it's better to suffer evil than to commit evil. And you have to live as if we're already in a perfect universe. Otherwise, what's the fucking point? Who wants to live in a bullshit universe? And you get what you expect. You perceive what you expect to see. Yeah, well, we're 14 minutes and 29 seconds into the movie, and I've only covered about 2/3 of the stuff on the first page of notes I took, so I guess this is going to make a second movie. I'll be back later. Ciao.